The forest was silent, except for the whisper of wind through the trees. Somewhere deep inside the Whispering Pines Cemetery, a single car engine idled. The faint glow of its headlights caught the edges of old tombstones, turning them into pale ghosts. Vanessa Brooks stepped out of the driver's seat, her red coat glinting under the moonlight. In the trunk lay Grace Miller, 5 months pregnant, wrists tied, mouth taped, eyes wide with terror. Vanessa's lips curved into a calm, cold smile. "You always looked down on me, didn't you, Grace?" she whispered, dragging a small wooden coffin from the shadows. "But tonight you'll finally be beneath me, literally." Grace tried to speak, the tape muffling her desperate cries. Her body trembled from the tranquilizer still coursing through her veins. Vanessa ripped the tape off roughly, letting her scream echo through the woods. "Please," Grace gasped, voice breaking. "I'm pregnant! You don't have to do this!" Vanessa's eyes glimmered, unbothered. That baby was never meant to be born. Derek deserves better than a weak little nurse playing house. She lifted a pistol, pressing the cold barrel against Grace's swollen belly. Grace froze. Her heart thundered so hard she thought it might stop. The thought of her baby, of the tiny heartbeat inside her, made her fight back. "He doesn't love you, Vanessa. He's using you, just like he used me." Vanessa's smile cracked, revealing something dark beneath. "Then you can die believing that lie." The pistol clicked. Grace screamed, but before Vanessa could pull the trigger, a strange vibration rippled through the ground. Leaves shook. A low rumble grew into a thunderous roar. Vanessa looked up, startled. A blinding light sliced through the darkness, flooding the cemetery in white fire. The beam came from above, massive, mechanical, relentless. A helicopter hovered low, whipping the trees into chaos. The engraved stones gleamed under its light, and the coffin Vanessa had half buried gleamed like a warning. "Who the hell?" she hissed, shielding her eyes. Grace blinked through tears, blinded by the light. Somewhere in the blinding glow, she thought she heard a voice calling her name. "Grace! Grace Miller!" It was deep, urgent, familiar. Vanessa panicked, stumbling backward. Her gun slipped from her hand, clattering against a gravestone. The wind from the rotors nearly knocked her down. "Move!" a man shouted through a loudspeaker. "Drop the weapon!" Grace's mind spun. She knew that voice. She had heard it years ago, in laughter, in comfort, in memories she thought she had buried. It was Logan Pierce, her old friend. The man who once promised, "If you ever need me, I'll find you, even in the dark." Vanessa bolted toward her car, but the helicopter's searchlight followed her like judgment itself. Grace lay half inside the coffin, dirt covering her arms, heart hammering with life. As the ground trembled and light filled the forest, she whispered through her tears, "You found me." The night the sky refused to stay dark was the night Grace Miller's life began again. The night before everything collapsed, the Miller house glowed with the kind of warmth that only existed in photos. Grace Miller moved slowly around the kitchen, her belly just beginning to show, humming as she stirred a pot of chicken soup. Outside, the Texas sunset painted the sky gold, and for a brief moment, everything looked perfect. She had spent the whole day thinking about baby names. "Ethan for a boy, maybe Lily for a girl," she said softly to herself, smiling. The radio played an old country love song. Grace paused to feel the small kick inside her belly and whispered, "You're going to have the best dad." The front door creaked open. Derek Miller entered, his tie loosened, his eyes hidden behind exhaustion and something colder. "You're late," Grace said gently, glancing at the clock. "Everything's getting cold. Work ran over," he muttered, avoiding her eyes as he tossed his phone onto the counter. The screen lit up for a second, showing a text from V. "Dinner was perfect. You owe me dessert." Grace froze. "Who's Vi?" she asked softly. Derek laughed, forced and dry. "V? The client. Vanessa. You met her at the office party, right?" Grace murmured, but her voice wavered. She knew Vanessa. Too confident, too perfect. Something inside Grace twisted painfully, but she pushed the thought aside. She had promised herself not to become paranoid. During dinner, Derek barely spoke. His fork scraped the plate, his eyes lost somewhere else. Grace tried to fill the silence. "Mom called today," she said. "She wants us to visit before the baby's born. Noah said he'll paint the nursery this weekend." "Sure," Derek said, not listening. His phone buzzed again. He didn't check it, but Grace noticed the way his hand hovered, itching to pick it up. "You've been different lately," she said quietly. "Are we okay?" He looked up finally, his face unreadable. "Don't start, Grace. I'm under pressure. You wouldn't understand." The word stung. She nodded, pretending to accept it, but her hands trembled. The soup in her spoon rippled. When he stood to leave the table, she asked, "Where are you going?" "Out. A client meeting." "At 9 p.m.? Yeah, that's how real business works." His tones snapped like a whip. She wanted to argue, to demand the truth, but instead she just watched him grab his coat and leave. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the quiet house. Later, Grace wandered into the living room, picking up his phone that he'd forgotten on the counter. One new message flashed from Vi. "Don't forget what we planned for tomorrow." Whispering Pines. Midnight. Her heart stopped. Whispering Pines. The name felt like a bad omen, a place she'd heard in ghost stories as a child. She dropped the phone, breathing hard, her body shaking. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, the lights flickered, and the wind began to rise. Grace pressed her hands to her belly, whispering to her baby, "Whatever happens, Mommy's here. We'll be okay." She didn't know it yet, but that was the last dinner she would ever cook in that house. Saturday night arrived, dressed in glitter and secrets. The downtown Austin Marriott ballroom sparkled under chandeliers, the kind of place where money disguised misery. Grace adjusted the strap of her simple blue dress, her hand resting on her small belly. Derek stood beside her, tux crisp, smile sharper than the knife he hid behind it. "You look beautiful," he said automatically, eyes scanning the crowd instead of her face. Grace smiled faintly. "You don't have to sound so surprised." Businessmen clinked glasses, laughter floated like perfume. Everyone there seemed to know Derek. He was the charming realtor with a golden future. But Grace noticed how he tightened his hand every time someone mentioned debt, loans, or market crashes. Then Vanessa Brooks arrived. The room seemed to bend around her. Black silk gown, red lipstick, confidence dripping from every word. She crossed the floor like she owned it, brushing a hand over Derek's shoulder. "Mr. Miller," she purred, "you clean up well." Grace's stomach twisted. Derek froze for half a second, just long enough for Grace to see it, before forcing a laugh. "Vanessa, you remember my wife, Grace?" Vanessa's smile widened, fake but flawless. "Of course, how could I forget? You're even more radiant than the last time." Grace shook her hand. It was cold, steady, powerful. Something in Vanessa's gaze said, "I know you don't belong here." As the night unfolded, Grace drifted between conversations, feeling like a ghost among sharks. She overheard whispers, Derek promising big returns soon, Vanessa offering legal cover. Every laugh sounded hollow. At the bar, Grace caught a reflection in the mirror. Vanessa leaning close to Derek, whispering something that made him smirk. Their fingers brushed, the kind of touch you only give when you think no one's watching. Grace's heart pounded. She forced herself to stay calm, sipping water to steady her shaking hands. The baby kicked softly inside her, as if sensing danger. Moments later, Derek returned, pretending nothing happened. "You okay?" he asked casually. "I'm fine," she lied, her smile practiced. "Just tired." He nodded, already scanning the room for Vanessa. When the dinner ended, guests flooded out in laughter. Grace grabbed Derek's arm. "We need to talk," she whispered. "Not here," he hissed through his teeth. "Don't make a scene." Vanessa passed by then, her perfume sharp and sweet, leaving behind a note slipped into Derek's pocket. Grace caught it, a corner of white paper, and before he could stop her, she pulled it free. The handwriting was elegant, curved. It read, "Tomorrow night, Whispering Pines. Bring her if you have to." Grace stared, cold spreading through her chest. "What is this?" Derek snatched it back, his jaw clenched. "It's business. You wouldn't understand." "Business in a cemetery?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he forced a smile and guided her toward the exit, his grip too tight. Cameras flashed as they stepped into the night, the perfect couple framed in light, while behind them, Vanessa watched with a smirk that could cut glass. Grace didn't know it yet, but she had just shaken hands with the woman who would bury her alive. Derek Miller sat alone in his dimly lit office, the glow from his computer reflecting on stacks of overdue bills. Numbers bled red across the screen, debts, failed investments, angry emails from lenders. His hands trembled as he poured whiskey into a glass. Each sip burned like guilt. A soft knock echoed at the door. "Come in," he said, voice hoarse. Vanessa Brooks stepped inside, wearing black, sleek and deliberate. She moved like a shadow. "Rough night, Derek?" she asked, closing the door behind her. He didn't look up. You know exactly how rough. I'm finished. The company's broke, the bank's calling in everything. Vanessa leaned against his desk, crossing her legs. You're not finished. You just need to get creative. He let out a hollow laugh. Creative doesn't pay off a $700,000 hole. Her smile was quiet, dangerous. Actually, it can. She slid a folder toward him. Inside were documents, insurance forms signed by Grace, listing Derek as sole beneficiary. You're sitting on $2 million and don't even realize it. Derek's eyes widened. That's her life insurance. It's for emergencies. Exactly, Vanessa said softly. And I'd say you're in one. He stared at her, trying to understand. You're not serious. Oh, I'm deadly serious. She walked behind him, placed a hand on his shoulder. You said it yourself. Grace is fragile. The pregnancy, the fainting spells, one wrong turn on a dark road. Accidents happen all the time. Derek pushed her hand away, pacing. You're insane. Am I? Vanessa's tone shifted, smooth as poison. You'd be free. No debts. No nagging wife asking about your failures. You'd have me, and everything we could build together. He turned to her, anger flickering with temptation. You think I could live with that? You already are, she whispered. You're lying to her every day. You're halfway there, Derek. You just need to finish the story. For a moment, silence swallowed the room. The clock ticked loudly. Outside, rain began to tap against the windows. Finally, he muttered, Even if I wanted to. How? Vanessa smiled, opening another folder. Inside was a map of the Whispering Pines Cemetery, red circles marking a secluded clearing. Old groundkeepers say no one goes there anymore. Deep woods, no cameras. I can handle the details. You just need to bring her. He stared at the map like it was a confession. You've thought of everything. I've thought of you, she replied. Us. Derek sat down heavily, rubbing his face. His conscience screamed, but the weight of debt, fear, and greed pressed harder. She's pregnant, he whispered. All the more tragic, Vanessa said, voice sweet and cold. People will pity you, the perfect husband who lost everything. He looked up at her, broken and cornered. If we do this, there's no turning back. She leaned in close, her breath brushing his ear. There never was. When she left, Derek poured another drink, staring at the insurance papers. Each drop of whiskey echoed like a countdown. By midnight, he had already decided that love was cheaper dead. Sunday morning came, wrapped in quiet sunlight, the kind that fools you into thinking the world is still kind. Grace Miller sat on the porch, sipping decaf tea, rubbing her belly as soft country music drifted from the radio. She was tired but happy to feel her baby move again after a restless night. She didn't know her husband had already signed her death sentence. A black SUV rolled up the driveway. When she looked up, she almost dropped her cup. Logan? She gasped, standing as a tall man in a gray jacket stepped out. His smile was the same, warm, honest, the kind that always made people believe everything would be okay. Hey, Gracie, Logan Pierce said, using the nickname only he dared. Austin hasn't changed much. She laughed, but her eyes watered. It's been years. You should have called. He shrugged. Would have ruined the surprise. He reached into the SUV and pulled out a small box. I made something for you. Grace opened it and found a sleek silver wristband, smooth as glass. A bracelet? Not just a bracelet, he said proudly. It's a prototype from my company. Tracks heart rate, blood oxygen, and location. Basically, a guardian angel for new moms. Grace smiled, sliding it onto her wrist. You're still saving the world one gadget at a time. Trying to, he said softly, eyes lingering on her belly. How far along? Almost 5 months. You look beautiful, Grace. Motherhood suits you. She blushed, glancing toward the window where Derek's car wasn't yet back from his so-called business meeting. Thanks. Things have been complicated. Logan's brow furrowed. Complicated how? She hesitated, forcing a laugh. You know, married life, bills, hormones, the usual. He didn't believe her, but he didn't push. Instead, he changed the subject. Promise me you'll keep that bracelet on. If your pulse drops or something's wrong, it alerts my system. I'll get a notification immediately. Grace nodded. You sound like my mom. Good. Somebody has to. He winked, and for a second she felt safe again. They talked for an hour about old memories, college jokes, the way life used to be before responsibility and regret. Logan told her about his aviation company, his helicopter fleet for emergency rescues. Grace told him about her patience and how helping others made her feel alive. Then Derek's car turned onto the street. Logan noticed first. That your husband? Grace's face stiffened. Yeah, he doesn't like surprises. I can go, Logan said gently. No, stay, she started, but Derek was already out of the car, walking fast, jaw tight. Logan Pierce, Derek said, shaking his hand with too much force. Didn't expect to see you. Just checking on an old friend, Logan replied calmly. Brought her something for health monitoring. Right, Derek muttered, staring at the bracelet like it was a weapon. Nice, high-tech. After a tense silence, Logan nodded to Grace. Keep it on, promise? I promise, she said, her voice quiet but steady. When his SUV disappeared down the road, Derek turned to her, eyes dark. You didn't tell me he was back. Grace swallowed hard. You didn't ask. That night, while Derek drank alone, Grace lay awake touching the bracelet's smooth surface. She didn't know it yet, but that small circle of silver would be the only reason she lived to see another sunrise. By Monday evening, the air inside the Miller house had turned heavy, thick with things unsaid. Grace tried to make conversation, but Derek barely looked up from his laptop. His phone kept buzzing on the counter, the screen flashing a single letter over and over, V. Grace folded laundry at the kitchen table, watching him from across the room. You've been working late a lot lately, she said softly. Trying to keep us afloat, he replied, eyes locked on the screen. Is that why you're texting Vanessa at midnight? His fingers froze for half a second. Then he looked up, smiling coldly. You went through my phone? I didn't have to, she said quietly. You leave it everywhere. Derek stood, the chair scraping across the tile. You don't get to spy on me, Grace. You don't know what I'm dealing with. Her voice broke. Then tell me. I'm your wife, Derek. I'm carrying your child. He turned away, jaw tight. Exactly. That's why you need to stay out of it. The silence that followed felt like a wall. Grace pressed her hands to her belly, the baby shifting inside her. She wanted to scream, but instead she whispered, I just want my husband back. Derek didn't answer. He grabbed his keys. I've got a meeting, he said, already halfway out the door. Grace watched him drive off into the fading sunset, her heart sinking with delight. Hours passed. Rain began to fall. The house creaked in the wind. Around 9 p.m. the phone rang. It was her mother. Mama? Grace answered softly. Sweetheart, I couldn't sleep, Martha said. I had that dream again. You were calling for help, but I couldn't find you. There were trees everywhere and dirt. Grace forced a laugh. It's just a dream, Mama. Dreams mean something, Martha insisted. Stay with someone tonight, please. I'll be fine, Grace said, but her hands were trembling. When she hung up, thunder rolled in the distance. She texted Derek, Where are you? No reply. At 10:15, headlights flashed outside. Grace exhaled in relief until she saw the silhouette. It wasn't Derek, it was Vanessa. Grace opened the door halfway. Vanessa, what are you doing here? Vanessa's smile was polite, almost sweet. Derek called me. He said you were upset. He thought a little drive might calm you down. Grace hesitated. He's not answering his phone. Signal's bad where he is, Vanessa said, eyes glinting. Come on, Grace, you need some air. It's just the two of us girls. Something about her tone made Grace's stomach knot. Still, she grabbed her coat. Fine, just a short drive. Vanessa guided her into the car, the rain hitting the windshield in sharp bursts. As they drove out of town, Grace realized they weren't heading toward the main road. Where are we going? Vanessa smiled at the dark forest ahead. Someplace peaceful. Grace's pulse began to race. The bracelet on her wrist flickered faintly red, detecting her fear. She glanced at it, but Vanessa noticed. Nice toy, Vanessa said. Let's hope it can't save you. The road narrowed into a dirt path. Through the rain-streaked window, Grace saw the faint outline of old tombstones. Her voice shook. Vanessa, stop the car. Vanessa didn't even blink. We're here. The engine died. The forest swallowed the sound. And that was the moment Grace Miller realized she might never go home again. The rain had stopped by the time Vanessa parked beside the rusted gate of Whispering Pines Cemetery. The air smelled of wet earth and old decay. Crickets hummed somewhere far away, as if the forest itself held its breath. Grace's pulse thudded in her ears. Why here? She asked, voice trembling. Vanessa turned to her, lipstick still perfect, eyes colder than steel. Because it's quiet, she said. No one comes here anymore. Before Grace could move, Vanessa pulled a gun from her coat. Out. Grace froze. Vanessa, please. Out. The word cracked through the air like lightning. Grace stepped out slowly, barefoot on the damp ground. Her heart raced so fast the bracelet on her wrist flickered red, reading distress. Vanessa noticed and sneered. "You think that toy's gonna save you? It won't work out here." She gestured with the gun toward a small clearing lined with forgotten gravestones. In the center sat an old wooden coffin, half rotted, as if dug up from another century. Grace's breath caught. "What is that?" "Your retirement plan," Vanessa said coolly. "Courtesy of Derek Miller." The world tilted. "Derek?" Grace whispered, disbelief cutting through her voice. "He wouldn't." "Oh, he would," Vanessa interrupted, stepping closer. "He signed the papers, the insurance, the will, everything. I just do the dirty work." Grace's knees buckled. "You're lying." Vanessa tossed a crumpled photo at her feet, a photo of Derek and Vanessa, arms around each other, laughing. "He was easy to break. You, on the other hand." She aimed the gun. "You're tougher than you look." Grace backed away, hands raised. "Vanessa, I'm pregnant. Please. I'll leave. You'll never see me again." Vanessa tilted her head. "Sweetheart, that's the problem. You already stayed too long." With her free hand, she grabbed a roll of duct tape and rope from the coffin. The sight made Grace's stomach twist. Vanessa forced her to lie down inside the box, pressing the barrel of the gun to her temple when she resisted. "Please don't do this," Grace begged, tears streaming down her face. "You don't have to kill me. Whatever he promised you, it's not worth it." Vanessa leaned closer, her voice dripping venom. "He promised me everything he took from me, his time, his money, his love. The only thing standing in my way was you." Grace's hands shook violently as Vanessa bound her wrists and ankles. The wood beneath her creaked. The smell of rot filled her lungs. She screamed, but the forest swallowed her voice. Vanessa smirked, pressing the tape across Grace's mouth. "Goodbye, Mrs. Miller." The lid slammed shut. Darkness. Grace's body convulsed as she heard dirt hitting the top of the coffin. Thud, thud, thud. Each sound was another second stolen from her life. Her heart pounded so fast she thought it would explode. She tried to scream, to move, to fight, but her limbs refused to obey. Above her, Vanessa hummed a soft tune, something disturbingly calm, almost lullaby-like. Then, through the thick wood and muffled soil, Grace heard her phone buzzing faintly in her pocket. It was faint, but enough. The bracelet blinked red again, flashing like a heartbeat. Somewhere, a signal had been sent. Vanessa never noticed. "Rest in peace," she whispered, tossing the last shovel of dirt over the grave. But the ground above Grace Miller's coffin began to glow faintly, an electronic pulse no one could see, signaling to the man who would soon rewrite this night's ending. The weight of the earth pressed down on Grace Miller's chest like a stone. Darkness swallowed her whole, thick and endless. The air was wet, metallic, filled with the smell of rot and mud. She tried to move, but the ropes around her wrists bit into her skin. Every breath came shorter than the last. Her body screamed for oxygen. She tilted her head, pressing her cheek against the side of the coffin, gasping through the small crack near the lid. The sound of rain had faded, replaced by silence, a silence so loud it felt alive. Her heart raced, echoing in her ears. The baby kicked. It was faint, but there. "You're still with me," she thought desperately. "Hold on, my love. Please hold on." The bracelet on her wrist pulsed faintly, the light dim beneath layers of dirt. She remembered Logan's voice, steady, calm, promising. "If your pulse ever drops, I'll find you." Her trembling fingers scraped against the rough wood, searching for the button. She couldn't see it. She could barely think. Panic clawed up her throat, but she forced it back. "Breathe," she whispered through the tape, the word barely a vibration. "You have to breathe." Her nails caught the edge of the bracelet. She pressed down hard. Nothing happened. Again, again. Her lungs burned, vision blurring. "Come on," she gasped, tears leaking into her hair. Then faintly, click. The bracelet vibrated. A soft, rhythmic pulse hummed against her wrist. Somewhere, far above the earth, a signal shot through satellites, across state lines and into a control room in Austin, Texas. Logan Pierce was there, working late. He had just closed his laptop when the emergency alarm flashed red on his tablet. Device ID, G. Miller, heart rate critical. Location, unknown. He froze. His heart dropped. Then he bolted upright. "Trace it," he shouted to his assistant. "Now." Back underground, Grace's world was shrinking. The light of the bracelet flickered weakly, but she could no longer tell if it was real or her mind playing tricks. Memories began to blur. The first time Derek held her hand, their wedding, the day she told him she was pregnant. Each memory now felt poisoned. "You loved me once," she whispered to the darkness, voice hoarse. "Why?" Her baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if answering. The small movement snapped her back. She pressed her knees upward, hitting the coffin lid. It didn't budge. The air was almost gone. Above her, the forest shifted. The wind howled through the trees. Somewhere, an owl cried out. And then, faintly in the distance, the low rumble of engines. Grace didn't know what it was, but she felt it. The ground trembled. She blinked weakly, heart slowing. "Logan," she whispered. "Please." In the distance, through the cold blue haze of the night, the first beam of a searchlight cut through the forest. The helicopter's rotors roared against the sky. Dogs barked. Men shouted. Beneath 6 feet of dirt, Grace felt the vibration through the ground. Her lips curved into the faintest broken smile. Somewhere above, hope was coming. And for the first time that night, Grace Miller believed she might live. Miles away, the night over Austin cracked open with urgency. Inside Pierce Aeronautics Command Center, alarms screamed across every screen. Logan Pierce leaned over the console, his heart racing faster than the blinking red dot on the digital map. The signal from Grace's bracelet flickered in and out like a heartbeat fighting to survive. "Confirm coordinates," he barked. "Northwest, 32 miles out, near Whispering Pine Cemetery," his technician answered, typing furiously. "Signals faint, low oxygen, low pulse." Logan's stomach dropped. "Get the chopper ready, now." Rain was still misting over the helipad as he climbed aboard his helicopter, his co-pilot, Reese Donovan, strapped in beside him. "Who's the rescue?" Reese asked over the headset. "Grace Miller," Logan said, voice raw. "Pregnant, she's underground." Reese blinked. "Underground? Jesus. Just fly." Logan snapped. The rotors screamed to life, slicing through the fog. The helicopter lifted, spinning up through the dark clouds, climbing toward the storm. Meanwhile, deep below that storm, Grace was slipping between worlds. Her mind floated somewhere between sleep and surrender. The air was gone, her chest barely rose. Her fingers twitched weakly against the rope binding her wrists. The bracelet's faint glow was the only reminder that life still existed beyond the dirt. "Hold on," she whispered to her baby. "He's coming. I know he's coming." Above, the helicopter roared through the sky, following the beacon. Logan's eyes never left the map. "There," he said, pointing to the blinking dot as they approached a thick stretch of forest. "That's her. That's where she is." They dropped lower. The spotlight cut through the mist, scanning the ground. Old gravestones reflected like broken mirrors. The trees bent under the wind of the blades. Then, Logan saw it, a patch of fresh earth, darker and uneven, beside a half-dug grave. "That's it!" he shouted. "Hover here." Reese steadied the chopper as Logan grabbed the mic. "This is Logan Pierce. I need emergency response to Whispering Pine Cemetery. Possible live burial. Coordinates uploading now." Static crackled. Then the dispatcher's voice replied, "Copy that. Ground units en route." Logan jumped from the chopper as it lowered closer to the ground. The wind whipped through his hair, the searchlight painting the scene in ghostly white. He ran toward the disturbed soil, his boots sinking in the mud. "Grace!" he yelled. "Grace, can you hear me?" Nothing. He dropped to his knees, clawing at the dirt with his bare hands. Reese ran over with a shovel from the emergency kit. "There's movement." Logan gasped as the bracelet's light blinked through the mud. "She's here! She's alive!" Together they dug until the wooden lid appeared. Slick with rain and decay, Logan's hands shook as he pried it open. Inside, Grace's face was pale, lips blue, eyes half closed. The tape still covered her mouth. Come on, come on!" Logan tore the tape away, pressing 2 fingers against her neck. A beat, then another, faint but there. "She's got a pulse," he shouted. Reese radioed the others while Logan lifted Grace into his arms, her body limp, her hand still clutching the bracelet. Her eyelids fluttered as he whispered, "You're safe now, Gracie. I've got you." Above them, the helicopter's searchlight carved through the trees like a second sunrise. The world above her was chaos and light. The sound of blades thundered overhead as Logan Pierce carried Grace Miller's limp body toward the waiting helicopter. Mud streaked her pale skin, her hair tangled with dirt, her belly round and still. For one terrible moment, he thought he was too late. "Reese, get the med kit," he shouted, his voice cracking through the headset. Reese ripped open the first aid box as Logan laid Grace gently on the metal floor. Her chest barely moved, her pulse flickered like a weak flame. The baby monitor on the bracelet blinked red, then flatlined. No, 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 Logan muttered, pressing his hands against her sternum. Stay with me, Grace. He started compressions. Each push felt like a prayer. Come on, he whispered between breaths. You don't get to die. Not you. Not tonight. Reese attached oxygen tubes, the hiss of air filling the small cabin. The helicopter jolted as it lifted higher, racing toward Austin General Hospital. Wind roared through the open door, whipping against Logan's face. Vitals dropping, Reese shouted, checking the portable monitor. Heart rate at 20. No, 17. Logan ignored the numbers. He leaned down, his mouth near Grace's ear. Remember college? That time we got lost in the canyon and you said, if I die, at least I'll die laughing? His voice trembled. Well, this isn't funny, Gracie, so breathe. Nothing. He pressed again, counting out loud. 1, 2, 3, breathe. 1, 2, 3. A faint gasp broke through the hum of the rotors. It was small, but it was real. She's breathing, Reese yelled. Logan exhaled a sound that was half laughter, half sob. Grace's eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. Logan? She croaked, barely audible. I'm here, he said, gripping her hand tightly. You're safe now. Tears welled at the corners of her eyes. The baby? He looked to Reese, who was scanning the fetal monitor attached to the bracelet. The line spiked weakly, then steadied. Heartbeat detected, Reese confirmed. Baby's alive. Grace's lips trembled. A single tear slid down her dirt-streaked cheek. I thought I'd never see the sky again. Logan brushed her hair away from her face. You're going to see more than that, he said softly. You're going to live. You hear me? She nodded faintly, exhaustion dragging her back into unconsciousness. Logan turned back to Reese. ETA? 7 minutes. Tell the hospital to prep the ER and call Sheriff Alvarez. I want cops waiting when Derek shows his face. Reese relayed the message as the city lights came into view, tiny diamonds scattered across the black horizon. Logan looked down at Grace again. She was still breathing, still fighting, even after being buried alive. He tightened his grip on her hand and whispered, You're stronger than anyone I've ever known. The helicopter began its descent toward the hospital pad, its spotlight still blazing across the night. Below, people on the streets paused, looking up at the brilliance cutting through the clouds. For them, it was just another rescue. For Grace Miller, it was the moment she stole her life back from the grave. The steady beeping of hospital machines pulled Grace Miller out of the fog. Her first breath was sharp, painful, like waking inside a storm. The fluorescent light above her felt too bright, the sterile scent too clean after hours of earth and rot. For a moment, she thought she was still underground. Easy, a nurse said softly. You're safe now. Grace blinked, vision swimming. Her throat burned. Tubes ran from her arms, and a soft blanket covered her swollen belly. Then a voice, deep, calm, familiar, cut through the blur. Hey, Gracie. She turned her head slowly. Logan Pierce sat beside her bed, his shirt stained with mud, eyes red with exhaustion. He smiled, but there was fear in it. You scared the hell out of me, he said. Her voice came out cracked. You found me. He nodded. Couldn't let you get lost twice. Grace's lips trembled as tears slipped free. How long? About 12 hours, Logan said. You've been under observation since we pulled you out. Oxygen deprivation, dehydration, trauma. You're lucky to be here. She stared at her wrist. The bracelet still blinked faintly. This thing saved me. He smiled faintly. Guess I built it right. The door opened and Dr. Harper, a woman in her 40s with gentle eyes, stepped in. Good morning, Grace. How are we feeling? Grace swallowed. Like I've been buried alive. The doctor's eyes softened. You were? But you and the baby made it. Your vitals are stable and your child's heartbeat is strong. Grace exhaled shakily, one hand pressing to her stomach. Thank God. Dr. Harper hesitated, then added quietly, The sheriff would like to speak to you when you're ready. Grace's pulse spiked. Derek, she whispered, and Vanessa. They did this. Logan leaned forward. We'll handle them. You focus on breathing, okay? But Grace shook her head weakly. No, they'll try again. He'll come here. Harper reassured her. There's security outside your room. Sheriff Alvarez has already issued protective detail. You're safe here. Still, Grace couldn't relax. Every shadow in the corner looked like it might move. Every footstep in the hallway sounded like Derek's boots. Later, when the doctor left, Logan handed her a bottle of water. Drink, he said softly. You need strength for what's next. What's next? She asked, her voice trembling. Justice. He explained everything, how the signal had reached his system, how they'd found her, how Vanessa's car had been caught on satellite footage leaving the cemetery. It's only a matter of time before the police put the pieces together, he said. Grace listened, hands trembling around the water bottle. I trusted him, Logan. I loved him. I carried his child, and he buried me. Logan looked down, his jaw tightening. Then you'll rise again, and he'll watch you do it. The nurse entered to check vitals, but Grace barely heard. The room buzzed with machines, a mechanical heartbeat that matched her own. She stared at the window where sunlight crept in through the blinds, warm, golden, alive. After everything she'd been through, that light felt like a promise. And as she whispered to her unborn child, "We made it," she didn't see the figure standing down the hall. Derek Miller, watching through the glass, his face pale and unreadable. Morning light spilled across the sterile walls of Austin General. Grace Miller sat upright now, wrapped in blankets, her hair washed, her hands trembling around a cup of warm tea. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and new beginnings, but her mind was still buried underground. Every blink brought flashes of dirt closing in, of Vanessa's smirk, of the gun pressed to her belly. Dr. Harper entered quietly, holding a folder. "Good morning, Grace. How are you holding up?" Grace forced a small smile. "Still here. That's what matters." The doctor opened the folder, scanning results. "Your blood work shows oxygen deprivation, but no permanent damage. The baby's strong. You're healing faster than we expected." Grace nodded, relief washing over her. But then the doctor's voice lowered. "Sheriff Alvarez's team is here. They'd like to ask you a few questions." Grace's pulse jumped. "Already?" "They said it's time to start building your case," Harper said gently. The door opened, and Sheriff Tom Alvarez stepped in, tall and steady, wearing a beige Stetson and a calm that hid sharpness. A young forensic officer, Dana Wells, followed him, holding an evidence kit. "Mrs. Miller," Alvarez said, tipping his hat. "You've been through hell. We're just here to listen, not to push." Grace's eyes filled. "She buried me alive," she whispered. "Vanessa Brooks, and Derek, my husband, he planned it." Alvarez nodded slowly. "We found Vanessa's fingerprints on the shovel and your husband's on a map that matched your burial site. But we need more. Details only you can give." Grace inhaled shakily. "They took me from my house. Vanessa said Derek called her. She had a gun. She tied me up." Dana took careful notes. "Did she say anything specific? Something that proves intent?" Grace stared ahead, remembering Vanessa's voice. "He promised me everything he took from me. She said Derek promised her my life and that no one would find me." Alvarez exchanged a look with Dana. "That's intent," he muttered. The sheriff stepped closer. "Your bracelet? Mind if we take it for analysis? The data log might tell us exactly how long you were buried and when the signal went off." Grace hesitated, glancing at the silver band that had saved her life. "It's the only reason I'm here." "We'll return it," Alvarez promised. "But it could be what puts them behind bars." She unclasped it slowly, handing it over. As Dana sealed it in an evidence bag, Grace felt strangely exposed, like surrendering a piece of her heartbeat. Moments later, Logan entered, his expression protective. "Everything okay?" Alvarez nodded. "Better than okay. That device of yours? It's gonna help us nail them." Grace looked up at Logan, emotion swelling in her chest. "You built something that saves people. You saved me," he smiled faintly. "Guess I just built it for the right person." The sheriff tipped his hat again. "We'll be in touch, Mrs. Miller. And Logan, expect a call from the DA's office. They'll need your data logs." When they left, Grace sank back into the pillows, exhaustion returning. Logan took her hand gently. "You did good," he said. She stared out the window where sunlight danced on the glass. "I'm not done yet," she whispered. "I buried the fear with that coffin. Now I'm digging up the truth." Neither of them noticed the nurse walking past the door. Her badge upside down, her phone camera quietly snapping a photo of Grace's medical chart. Vanessa Brooks had friends in more places than anyone knew. Night fell over Austin General, turning the wide hospital windows into mirrors. Grace Miller couldn't sleep. The monitors hummed softly, a lullaby for survivors. She traced the faint bruise marks around her wrists, still seeing dirt under her nails. No amount of washing could make her feel clean. In the dim light, she whispered to her belly, "We made it, baby. We're safe now." But safety, as Grace would soon learn, was just an illusion. At 11:42 p.m., the elevator doors at the end of the corridor opened with a soft ding. A tall man stepped out, wearing a navy jacket and carrying a bouquet of lilies. His walk was calm, his expression unreadable. The nurse at the station smiled politely. "Can I help you, sir?" "Derek Miller," he said smoothly. "Here to see my wife." The nurse hesitated. "Visiting hours ended 2 hours ago." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "She's pregnant, traumatized. I'm just trying to comfort her. Please." The nurse's eyes softened. 10 minutes, she said finally. "Room 417. Derek's smile never reached his eyes. "Thank you." Grace was half asleep when the door opened. She stirred at the sound of footsteps. "Logan?" she murmured. "No, sweetheart," came a voice she hadn't expected to hear again. Her eyes flew open. Derek stood at the foot of her bed, shadows carving his face into something unfamiliar. The flowers trembled slightly in his hand. "You're alive," he said softly. Grace's throat tightened. "You tried to kill me." He set the flowers on the table, ignoring her words. "You don't know what you're saying. Vanessa, she twisted everything." Grace's voice rose. "She buried me. You signed the insurance forms, Derek. You planned it." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Keep it down. You're scaring the baby." Her heart pounded. "You have no right to talk about my baby." He sat on the edge of her bed, too close, his cologne mixing with the antiseptic smell. "Listen to me. I made mistakes. I panicked. Vanessa was blackmailing me. But I can fix this. We can leave town. Start over." Grace shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "You killed the life we had. You killed everything." His jaw tightened. "Don't say that. You're my wife." She reached for the call button, but Derek grabbed her wrist, too fast, too hard. "You're not calling anyone." "Let go of me," she hissed, fear flooding back like poison. Derek leaned closer, his whisper venomous. "You think that billionaire friend of yours can protect you? Logan won't always be around. And if you testify against me, Grace, there will be consequences." The door burst open. "Step away from her." Logan stood there, his face pale with rage, a security guard beside him. Derek released Grace instantly, his mask of innocence snapping back into place. "We were just talking," he said smoothly. The guard stepped between them. "Sir, visiting hours are over. You need to leave." Derek straightened his jacket, smirking. "Of course, I'll be back in the morning." Grace's voice shook. "Don't come near me again." He paused at the door, his eyes cold. "You should have stayed buried." When he was gone, Grace broke down. Logan rushed to her side, pulling her into his arms. "He won't touch you again," he promised, but his voice was trembling too. Outside the room, Derek walked down the hall and dialed his phone. "Vanessa," he said, his tone low and furious. "She's alive and talking. We need to finish what we started." Morning sunlight washed over the hospital like it was trying to erase the night before. But inside room 417, the air was still electric with fear. Grace Miller hadn't slept. Her hands kept shaking every time she remembered Derek's whisper. "You should have stayed buried." Logan Pierce stood by the window, phone in hand, voice hard and controlled as he spoke to Sheriff Alvarez. "You need to post someone outside that door 24/7, he said. "If Derek Miller even breathes near her again, I want him in cuffs." "I've already assigned 2 deputies, Alvarez replied through the phone. "But be careful, Logan. Derek's not working alone." "Trust me," Logan said, glancing at Grace. "I'm aware." He hung up, turning to her. "You're safe now." Grace gave a weak laugh. Safe feels like a word people use when they don't know what else to say. He smiled softly. "Then I'll say something real. You're alive, and he hates that. That means you've already won the first round." She looked down at her belly. "I don't feel like I've won anything. He was here, Logan. He looked at me like I was still his possession." Logan crouched beside her, taking her hand. "He doesn't own you. He lost that right the moment he left you in that coffin." For the first time since the attack, Grace let herself cry. Logan didn't say anything. He just held her hand until the sobs quieted. Minutes later, the door opened. Reporters' voices echoed down the hallway. Sheriff Alvarez, hat in hand. "Morning, folks. You ready for the next step?" Grace straightened slightly. "What step?" "The public one," Alvarez said. "The DA's office wants to use your story to pressure them. Derek and Vanessa think you're too broken to fight. Let's prove them wrong." Grace swallowed hard. "You mean a press conference?" "Exactly," Alvarez said. "If they see you alive, strong, and talking, they'll panic. And when people like them panic, they make mistakes. Logan nodded. He's right. I can have my PR team handle the security and we'll hold it in the hospital atrium. No way they can get near you. Grace hesitated. The idea of cameras, lights, questions, it terrified her. But then she remembered the darkness, the dirt, the sound of Vanessa's laughter above the coffin. Okay, she said finally, I'll do it. An hour later, the atrium was packed with reporters, flashing cameras, and murmurs of disbelief. Grace sat beside Logan and Sheriff Alvarez, a blanket over her legs, her hands steady for the first time in days. When the microphones turned toward her, she took a deep breath. My name is Grace Miller, she began. A week ago, my husband and his lover buried me alive. They thought I'd die quietly. They were wrong. The room fell silent, except for the clicking of cameras. I survived because someone believed in me, and I won't stop until they can't hurt anyone else. Outside on a nearby street, a black car idled. Derek sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. Vanessa sat beside him, sunglasses hiding her fury. She's playing the victim, Vanessa hissed. We need to shut her up. Derek's eyes narrowed. We will, tonight. Back inside, Logan placed a hand on Grace's shoulder as reporters shouted questions. You did perfect, he whispered. Grace smiled faintly. This time, she said, I get to bury them. The city buzzed with Grace Miller's story. Every news station carried her trembling but defiant words from the hospital press conference. Buried alive, the headlines screamed. Pregnant survivor tells all. Public sympathy turned like a spotlight, and under its glare, Derek and Vanessa began to crumble. Inside a luxury penthouse downtown, Derek paced the floor, shirt half-buttoned, veins bulging in his neck. The TV blared Grace's face again, her calm strength twisting the knife of his own failure. Turn that off, he barked. Vanessa Brooks lounged on the couch, wine glass in hand, the picture of composed chaos. You should be proud, she said dryly. She makes a beautiful widow. She's not supposed to be anything, Derek roared, sweeping the remote off the counter. She was supposed to disappear. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Relax, Derek. The police don't have enough yet. Without evidence, it's just her word against yours. He turned on her, pointing a shaking finger. You don't get it. That billionaire Logan Pierce. He's got data, video feeds, proof. He's turning her into some kind of saint, and we're the villains. Vanessa smirked. Newsflash. We are the villains. Not funny. Derek's voice cracked. My accounts are frozen. The cops are watching my office, and if you think I'm going down alone. She cut him off sharply. Careful. Her voice dropped low, deadly. You start threatening me, and I'll show them those texts you sent, the ones that prove this was your idea. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the city below. Derek's jaw tightened. You wouldn't. Vanessa stood, circling him slowly. I've covered for you from the start. I buried your mistakes, your debts, and your little wife. Don't test me. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Derek laughed softly, too softly. You think you're smarter than me, don't you? I know I am. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to her. Then here's to survival, he said. Forcing a grin, Vanessa eyed the glass, then clinked it lazily against his. To survival. They drank. 5 minutes later, her smirk began to fade. She blinked, confused, touching her throat. What? Did you? Her voice cracked. Derek leaned back in his chair, swirling his untouched drink. You're not the only one who can plan ahead, Vanessa. Her eyes widened in horror as the realization hit. The glass dropped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. You poisoned me? He shrugged coldly. You were going to betray me. I just moved first. Vanessa stumbled, gasping for air, clutching the edge of the counter. Her wine-red nails left streaks across the white stone. You idiot, she rasped. They'll find out everything. He grabbed her arm, holding her upright just long enough to whisper, then die quietly. It's what you're best at. Her knees buckled. She collapsed, eyes wide open, still defiant even in death. Derek stood over her body, chest heaving, sweat dripping from his forehead. For the first time, the silence in the apartment felt suffocating. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, muttering to himself, now it's just me and Grace. But as he turned, the TV flickered back on. Grace's voice filled the room again, strong, alive, unbroken. You tried to bury me, she said to the world, but you planted me instead. Derek froze. For the first time, fear, not guilt, settled deep in his bones. The next morning, Derek Miller woke to sirens echoing faintly in the distance. His head throbbed. The apartment reeked of spilled whiskey and fear. He turned toward the kitchen and froze. Vanessa Brooks's body still lay there, eyes open, lifeless. Her glass of poisoned whiskey gleamed beside her hand. For a moment, Derek couldn't move. Then the survival instinct that had carried him through every lie kicked in. He grabbed a towel, wiped the counter, poured bleach over the floor, and dragged her body toward the bedroom. "You made me do this," he muttered. "You were going to betray me." His phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. Hesitant, he answered. "Mr. Miller?" A woman's voice said. "This is ADA Karen Nguyen with the Travis County District Attorney's Office. We'd like you to come in for questioning this afternoon." Derek's throat went dry. "About what?" "Your wife's case," Karen said calmly. "We have new evidence linking your vehicle to the scene that I suggest you come voluntarily." He forced a chuckle. "Of course, anything to help." When the call ended, he slammed the phone down. "New evidence," he hissed. "Logan Pierce." He went to his desk, opening the hidden drawer behind the files. Inside, a passport, $10,000 in cash, and a small black USB drive, the one Vanessa had used to store their emails and plans. It was his insurance policy. "You thought you could outsmart me," he muttered, pocketing it. He stuffed clothes into a duffel bag, eyes darting to the door every few seconds. "Mexico," he whispered to himself. "Disappear for a year. Come back new." But outside, 2 unmarked cars were already parked by the curb. Down the street, Logan Pierce stood with Sheriff Alvarez, both watching the building. Logan's voice was low. "You sure you want to do this without a warrant?" Alvarez adjusted his hat. "We're not going in, we're watching. Guys like him always run. That's when they make mistakes." Inside, Derek spotted the cars through the blinds. "They're watching me." His voice trembled. He zipped the bag shut, grabbed his car keys, and bolted. He took the service elevator, sprinting through the basement garage. The moment he hit the ignition, the radio came alive with a familiar voice. It was Grace. A replay of her press conference played across every channel. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. "I know the truth, and I know justice is coming." Derek slammed his fist against the steering wheel. "You think you can beat me?" he shouted. "You can't." He tore out of the garage, tires screaming. The 2 unmarked cars followed instantly. Alvarez radioed ahead. "Target on the move. Northbound, I-35. Logan's voice crackled through the comms. "Keep him in sight. I want him alive." Derek sped through traffic, adrenaline surging. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw blue lights growing closer. "Not yet," he hissed, turning off the highway onto a dirt road toward the river. The car bounced violently. Ahead, the bridge was out, blocked by caution tape. He slammed the brakes, too late. The car skidded, spinning sideways, slamming into the guardrail. Steam hissed from the engine. Derek stumbled out, clutching the duffel. Behind him, sirens grew louder. He dropped to his knees, staring at the USB drive in his hand, the last proof of everything. Then a familiar voice echoed behind him. "It's over, Derek." He turned. Logan stood there, flanked by deputies, gun lowered but steady. "You can't protect her forever," Derek spat. Logan's eyes hardened. "She doesn't need protection anymore. She has the truth." As they cuffed him, the USB slipped from Derek's fingers, landing in the mud, his lies sinking with it. The courthouse hallway was cold enough to make Grace Miller's hands tremble. She sat outside the interrogation room, watching through the glass as Derek slumped at the table in handcuffs, silent, expression blank. Sheriff Alvarez stood beside her, murmuring, "He's not talking, he's waiting for a deal." Grace's eyes were hollow. "He doesn't deserve one." From the other side of the glass, Logan Pierce studied Derek's body language. Calm, too calm. "He's hiding something," Logan said. "Something big." Alvarez nodded. "That's why we're bringing in his accomplice." "Vanessa's dead," Grace whispered. "You found her in his apartment." "Right," Alvarez said slowly. "But before she died, she sent an email to a burner account connected to an adoption record. The DA traced it this morning. There's another layer here." Grace frowned. "What are you saying?" Before he could answer, a door opened down the hall. ADA Karen Nguyen stepped out, holding a thin file. "Grace," she said carefully, "we need you to see something." Grace took the file. Inside were 2 birth certificates, hers and Vanessa Brooks's. The names of the fathers were the same. Her world tilted. "No," she whispered. "No, this can't be right." "I'm afraid it is," Karen said gently. "Your father, Thomas Hayes, had another daughter. Vanessa was born 2 years before you, to another woman in Dallas. She changed her name after she turned 18. Grace's knees went weak. Logan caught her before she fell. You're telling me the woman who buried me alive was my sister? Karen nodded grimly. Half-sister, and it gets worse. She knew. Grace shook her head, tears streaming. She said Derek promised her everything he took from her. I thought she meant love, money, she meant family. In the interrogation room, Derek looked up suddenly, as if he could sense they were talking about her. Alvarez opened the door and walked in, placing the folder on the table. We know about Vanessa. We know about the sister connection. You want to start explaining? Derek's smirk returned. So she finally found out. Took her long enough. Alvarez leaned forward. Did you know too? Of course, Derek said, voice almost gleeful. Vanessa told me the first night we met. She said Grace didn't deserve the life she got. The family, the stability. She wanted to take it back. I just helped her do it. Grace's stomach twisted. From behind the glass, she screamed. You both ruined everything because of jealousy. Derek laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. You think she hated you because of me? She hated you because every time she looked at you, she saw what she should have been. Logan stormed toward the door, but Alvarez blocked him. Don't, he warned. Let him talk himself into prison. Derek leaned back in his chair. You can lock me up, but that blood between them, that's forever. You can't arrest blood. Grace pressed a hand to her chest, her breathing uneven. He's wrong, she whispered to Logan. Blood doesn't make family. Love does. Logan squeezed her shoulder. Then let's make sure his bloodline ends behind bars. Alvarez re-entered the hall, shutting the door. He's finished, he said. He just confessed to conspiracy and knowledge of the burial. That's enough to end him. Grace nodded through her tears. Vanessa thought she was reclaiming family. She only buried it deeper. Logan looked down the hall where light spilled through the courthouse windows. Let's make sure her ghost doesn't haunt you anymore, he said quietly. Grace stared at the file in her shaking hands, the proof of betrayal written in ink, and whispered, I don't want revenge anymore. I just want peace. But somewhere deep inside, she knew peace wouldn't come until justice did. Rain fell softly that evening, streaking down the wide hospital windows as Grace Miller sat on the bed, a folder clutched in her lap. The words inside haunted her, the truth about her father, Thomas Hayes, and the half-sister she never knew, the woman who had tried to kill her. She had asked her mother, Martha, to come. Now Martha stood in the doorway, her face pale, eyes swollen from crying. You wanted to see me, honey? Grace nodded slowly. Mom, I need you to tell me the truth. About Dad. About Vanessa. Martha hesitated, stepping closer. I was hoping you'd never have to know. Grace's voice cracked. She buried me alive, Mom, and she's my sister. I deserve to know. Martha sat down beside her, hands trembling. It was before you were born. Your father and I were separated for a while. He met another woman in Dallas. Her name was Linda Brooks. They had a baby girl. He came back to me, said it was a mistake, and I forgave him. He sent money every month, but we never talked about it again. Grace closed her eyes, tears spilling down. He abandoned her. He tried to make it right, Martha said softly. He even wrote her letters, every birthday, every Christmas. He just never mailed them. When he died, I kept them hidden. Do you still have them? Martha nodded. They're in my bag. She opened her purse and pulled out a worn envelope, edges yellowed with time. Grace's hands shook as she unfolded the top letter. The ink had faded, but the words were still clear. Dear Vanessa, I'm sorry for everything. I wish I could have been there to see you grow up. One day, I hope you'll meet your sister. Her name is Grace. She has your smile. Please don't hate her for what I took from you. Grace pressed a hand to her mouth, sobbing quietly. She did meet me, she whispered. She just didn't know how to love me. Martha wrapped an arm around her. Your father wanted peace, not this. Logan Pierce entered quietly then, holding a folder from the sheriff's office. Sorry to interrupt, he said gently, but you both need to see this. He placed several photographs on the bed. Vanessa, still alive, standing in Derek's apartment days before the poisoning. Surveillance footage. Grace's eyes widened. Wait, she survived? Logan nodded grimly. For a few hours, long enough to send another email to herself. It was a video confession. She said, Derek poisoned her, but she also admitted to burying you. The DA will use it to close both cases. Grace swallowed hard. So she told the truth at the end. Maybe she finally understood what guilt feels like, Logan said. Grace picked up the letters again, her voice barely a whisper. She didn't need revenge. She needed forgiveness. Martha looked at her daughter's tired eyes. You can still give it to her, honey. Don't let hate raise your baby. Grace nodded slowly, feeling her heart crack open and mend all at once. Then that's what I'll do. Logan touched her shoulder, smiling faintly. Your father would be proud. Grace looked out the window where rain shimmered under the hospital lights. He wanted his daughters to find each other. Maybe now, in some strange way, we finally have. Outside, thunder rolled, a soft reminder that peace never comes without the storm. 2 months later, the courthouse in downtown Austin buzzed like a hive. News vans lined the streets. Reporters shouted questions as Grace Miller, now visibly pregnant, stepped out of Logan Pierce's black SUV. Her hands trembled, but her chin was high. Sheriff Alvarez walked beside her, part escort, part guardian angel. Are you ready for this? Logan asked quietly, holding the door open. Grace nodded. I've been ready since the night they buried me. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Journalists, spectators, and victims' advocates filling every seat. On the defense side, Derek Miller sat in a gray suit, hair slicked back, eyes dead. He didn't look at Grace, not even once. At the prosecutor's table, ADA Karen Wynn organized a pile of evidence. Photos of the grave site, Vanessa's video confession, the insurance papers, and the digital data from the bracelet that had saved Grace's life. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The trial of State versus Derek Miller had begun. Karen opened with a calm but cutting voice. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not a story about love gone wrong. This is a story about greed, about a man who buried his wife alive for $2 million, and about a woman strong enough to crawl back from the grave. Grace closed her eyes as those words sank in. When it was Derek's turn, his defense attorney painted him as a desperate man manipulated by a vindictive mistress. But the jurors' eyes hardened when the footage appeared on the projector. Satellite images of his car leaving Whispering Pines, timestamps matching Grace's bracelet data. Karen clicked to the next slide. Vanessa's dying video. The courtroom went still. Vanessa's voice filled the speakers, weak and trembling. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Derek said it would be quick. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to kill her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Grace's mother, Martha, covered her mouth with shaking hands. Derek's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. The truth was out. When Grace took the stand, the room fell silent. The bailiff helped her up, careful of her stomach. She sat, hands folded, voice steady. Mrs. Miller, Karen began, can you tell the court what happened that night? Grace inhaled. I trusted my husband. He told me we were going for a drive. Next thing I remember, Vanessa was pointing a gun at me. She said Derek wanted it done. Then, the dirt. Her voice cracked, but she continued. I remember praying for my baby. And I remember the light, the helicopter. I thought it was heaven. The jury sat motionless. Even the judge looked shaken. When Karen finished, the defense tried to break her. Mrs. Miller, isn't it true that you and Mr. Pierce have a personal relationship? Grace met Derek's eyes for the first time. Yes, she said clearly, because he's the kind of man who saves people, not buries them. Whispers rippled through the room. Derek's face twitched, fury breaking through his mask. As the session adjourned, Logan helped Grace down the steps. You did incredible, he murmured. She smiled faintly. Now it's his turn to feel trapped. Behind them, the bailiffs escorted Derek out. Cameras flashed. For the first time, the man who thought he could bury everything was the one standing in the dark. The morning of the verdict dawned golden and sharp. Austin's courthouse steps were crowded with cameras, microphones, and murmuring spectators waiting for justice to breathe. Inside, Grace Miller sat beside ADA, Karen Wynn, her swollen belly a silent symbol of survival. Logan Pierce stood behind her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. The jury had deliberated for 12 hours. 12 hours of silence that felt like another burial. Grace's mother, Martha, clutched a small cross in her hands, whispering prayers under her breath. It'll be over soon, baby, she murmured. Sheriff Alvarez entered, nodding to Karen. He's here. 2 deputies escorted Derek Miller into the courtroom. His once perfect hair was unkempt, his eyes bloodshot. The arrogance that had once carried him was gone, replaced by a hollow stare. He wore an orange jumpsuit now instead of a suit, and the sight sent a ripple through the gallery. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced. Derek's lawyer, sweating under the lights, tried one last appeal. Your Honor, my client acted under psychological distress. He was manipulated by Vanessa Brooks, a deceased co-conspirator. Karen rose smoothly. Distress doesn't bury a woman alive, Your Honor. Intent does. He signed the insurance papers. He bought the rope. He drove her to that grave. Derek Miller didn't panic. He planned. The judge turned to the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict? The forewoman stood, her voice steady. We have, Your Honor. Every heart in the room held still. In the case of State of Texas versus Derek Allen Miller, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, cries, applause, sound crashed like thunder. Martha sobbed openly. Karen exhaled in relief. Logan's hand tightened around Grace's. Derek's face twisted in disbelief. No, he shouted, slamming his fists against the table. You can't do this. She was supposed to die. The bailiffs restrained him, forcing him back into his chair. Grace rose slowly, turning toward him. Her voice was calm but carried like a blade. You buried me to save yourself. But you can't bury the truth. Their eyes locked one final time, his full of rage, hers of resolve. The judge's gavel struck once, echoing through the room. Derek Allen Miller, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The words hung heavy, final, absolute. Derek slumped in his seat, the fight draining out of him. Grace, he whispered hoarsely, you were supposed to love me. She shook her head slowly. I did. That's what killed me the first time. The bailiffs led him away as cameras flashed, recording every step of his downfall. For the first time since that night in the woods, Grace felt air fill her lungs without fear. Outside, sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps. Reporters surrounded her, shouting questions, but she barely heard them. Logan guided her through the crowd, shielding her from the chaos. It's over, he said softly. Grace looked up at the sky, the same blue sky that had once watched her grave. No, she whispered, a small smile tugging at her lips. It's just beginning. Behind them, the courthouse doors closed with a heavy thud. Inside, Derek Miller's shadow faded from the light forever. And outside, Grace Miller, once buried, once broken, walked into the sunlight free. Months passed after the verdict, but justice has a strange way of echoing long after the gavel falls. Grace Miller had moved on, or at least tried to. Her belly was rounder now, the due date just weeks away. She spent her days in quiet places, therapy sessions, nursery shopping, and evenings sitting by Logan Pierce's lakeside home, watching the sunset melt into gold. But miles away, inside the gray walls of Huntsville State Prison, Derek Miller's nights were long and merciless. Gone were the tailored suits and luxury. His world was a 6x8 cell, a metal cot, and the endless chorus of chains and screams. He woke each night drenched in sweat, hearing Grace's voice echo in his dreams. You buried me to save yourself. It wasn't guilt that haunted him. It was rage. Rage that she lived. Rage that she'd moved on. And most of all, rage that the world believed she was the victim, not him. In the yard one morning, another inmate, tall, scarred, with a crooked smile, sat beside him. You're that real estate guy, the man said, the one who tried to kill his wife. Derek's jaw tightened. Don't believe everything you read, the man laughed. You think you're better than us, huh? You belong here. Derek turned away, but the laughter followed him, relentless. Prison had no walls high enough to hide from karma. Meanwhile, back in Austin, Grace sat with her therapist, Dr. Eliana Rhodes. You still have nightmares? Eliana asked gently. Sometimes, Grace admitted, but they're different now. It's not fear anymore, it's pity. Pity for Derek? Grace nodded slowly. He's trapped in the grave he dug for himself. That night, Logan found her on the porch, gazing at the moon. You okay? He asked. She smiled faintly. He used to think money made him untouchable. Now he's got nothing, not even peace. Logan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. That's karma. It always collects. But karma wasn't done yet. Inside the prison, Derek was called to the warden's office. A letter sat on the desk, unopened. The warden slid it toward him. From your lawyer, he said. Derek tore it open impatiently and froze. It wasn't from his lawyer. It was from the hospital. The words blurred in his vision as he read. Vanessa Brooks, deceased. Her estate has been seized. All remaining assets transferred to Grace Miller under the Hayes Trust. He dropped the letter, chest tightening. No, he hissed. No, she can't have it all. The warden glanced up. Something wrong, Miller? But Derek couldn't answer. The irony hit him like a blade. Everything he had killed for, everything he had destroyed, now legally belonged to the woman he tried to erase. That night, a storm swept over the prison. Lightning flashed through the barred window as Derek sat on his bunk, staring at his reflection in a piece of broken metal. For the first time, he saw himself clearly. Not a victim, not a mastermind, but a coward who'd buried love for greed. In Austin, Grace woke suddenly from sleep, heart racing. The baby kicked hard once, twice, then calmed. She smiled through the tears. "It's okay, little one," she whispered. "The storm's almost over." And somewhere between thunderclaps and guilt, Derek Miller screamed into the dark, his voice lost beneath the sound of rain hammering against the bars. The world outside was quiet that morning, painted in soft shades of dawn. For the first time in what felt like years, Grace Miller woke without fear. She was in her new home, a cozy farmhouse overlooking Lake Travis, sunlight spilling through sheer curtains. Logan Pierce had insisted she move there, far from the memories of Austin, far from shadows. But that morning, a different kind of pain rippled through her. She gasped, gripping the edge of the bed. "Oh my God," she whispered, "it's time." Martha rushed into the room. "Honey, what's wrong?" Grace smiled through the contraction. "He's ready to meet the world." Logan appeared in the doorway within seconds, barefoot, panic flashing in his usually calm eyes. "Are you sure? We've still got 2 weeks." Grace laughed weakly. "Tell that to him." Within minutes, the house turned into organized chaos. Martha grabbed the hospital bag. Logan fumbled with car keys. Grace, breathing steadily, whispered between contractions, "I never thought I'd live to see this day." Logan knelt beside her, taking her hand. "You earned this day. You fought for it." The drive to Austin General was a blur of sirens and sunlight. By the time they reached the delivery room, Grace was drenched in sweat, her face pale but determined. Dr. Harper, her guardian angel since the night of her rescue, was waiting, calm and confident. "All right, Grace," Harper said. "You know the drill. Deep breaths. We're right here." Martha held her daughter's shoulders, whispering prayers, while Logan stood near her head, voice trembling. "You've got this, Gracie. You've already beaten death. This is just life asking for proof." Hours passed in waves of pain and strength. Between contractions, memories flooded her. The coffin, the dirt, the sound of the helicopter. Each memory pushed her harder. She wasn't just giving birth, she was reclaiming everything she'd lost. Finally, with one last cry that tore through the air, a new sound answered her. A baby's first wail, sharp and pure. Dr. Harper smiled, lifting the newborn. "It's a boy." Grace broke into tears as they placed the tiny wriggling child on her chest. He was warm, fragile, perfect. "Hello, my miracle," she whispered. Logan's eyes glistened as he leaned close. "You did it?" "No," Grace said softly, her fingers brushing the baby's tiny hand. "We did it." Martha kissed her forehead, crying openly. "You're your father's daughter, Grace. Strong, stubborn, and full of light." Outside the window, the storm clouds that had gathered overnight began to part. Beams of sunlight spilled across the sky, reflecting off the lake below. It was as if the universe itself had been holding its breath for this moment. Later that evening, Grace sat propped against pillows, the baby asleep in her arms. Logan stood nearby, silent, watching the way she smiled at her son. "Have you picked a name yet?" he asked. She nodded, eyes shining. "Liam Thomas Pierce, after my father and the man who brought me back to life." Logan froze, emotion flickering across his face. "Grace." She looked up, meeting his gaze. "You're not just the man who saved me, Logan. You're the man who stayed." He sat beside her, his hand brushing the baby's soft hair. "Then let me keep staying." And for the first time since the night she clawed her way out of the grave, Grace Miller laughed, full, free, alive. Outside, the sun blazed brighter than ever, as if to say, darkness never wins forever. Spring returned to Texas like forgiveness after a long winter. 3 months had passed since Grace Miller gave birth to her son Liam. Life had grown quiet, gentle. The lake outside Logan Pierce's farmhouse shimmered under the golden light, and the world finally felt like it belonged to her again. That morning, Grace stood before a mirror, holding her sleeping baby in one arm while her mother, Martha, fussed over her hair. "You're glowing, sweetheart," Martha said, dabbing away a tear. "Your father would be so proud." Grace smiled softly. "I can almost feel him here." The baby stirred, opening wide blue eyes, the same shade as Grace's. She kissed his forehead. Mommy's just nervous, that's all. Martha chuckled. Honey, after surviving what you've survived, a wedding's the easy part. Outside, music drifted from the lakeside garden. Guests gathered under a canopy of white flowers and fairy lights. Sheriff Alvarez stood with ADA Karen Guillen, both smiling proudly. Jenna Park, Grace's loyal nurse friend, helped arrange the seats. It wasn't a grand affair. Just close friends, family, and the quiet hum of peace. Logan waited near the altar, dressed in a light gray suit, no tie, sleeves rolled up in his usual effortless way. His heart pounded as he looked toward the house. She's late, he joked to Alvarez, trying to hide his nerves. She's earned the right to make an entrance, the sheriff said with a grin. Then the music changed. Grace appeared at the edge of the path, sunlight glowing on her white lace dress. The crowd gasped softly. She wasn't the same fragile woman they once pitied. She was radiant, strong, reborn. Martha walked beside her, carrying baby Liam wrapped in a soft blue blanket. When Grace reached the altar, Logan exhaled as though he'd been holding his breath for years. You look like a miracle, he whispered. She smiled. That's because I'm standing next to one. The ceremony began, simple and heartfelt. As the minister spoke, Grace glanced at the lake, where ripples sparkled like light dancing on memories. She thought of her father, of Vanessa, even of Derek, ghosts of her past that no longer held her prisoner. When it was time for vows, Logan went first. Grace, when I found you that night, I thought I was rescuing you. But truth is, you saved me. You reminded me that love isn't about control or fear. It's about faith. You're my faith. Tears streamed down Grace's cheeks as she replied, Logan, you brought me back from darkness, not just with your hands, but with your heart. You showed me that being broken doesn't mean being unworthy. You and Liam are my second chance at life, and I promise I'll never take it for granted. The crowd sniffled and smiled as the minister declared them husband and wife. When Logan leaned in to kiss her, the world seemed to stop. Applause erupted, echoing across the water. Even baby Liam cooed, as if approving of his new beginning. Later, as lanterns floated over the lake, Grace stood barefoot on the grass, her white dress brushing the water's edge. Logan wrapped his arms around her from behind. Do you ever think about how close we came to losing all this? He asked quietly. Grace nodded, gazing at the reflection of stars. Every day. But that's what makes it sacred. We earned this peace. He kissed her temple, and we'll protect it. As music and laughter filled the night, Grace whispered to herself, the woman they buried is gone. The one who rose, she's just getting started. And under the moonlit sky, surrounded by love, she finally believed it. The world had finally stopped spinning for Grace Pierce, formerly Grace Miller. But she wasn't the kind of woman who could rest for long. 6 months after her wedding, her life by the lake had settled into something soft and real. Mornings smelled of coffee and sunlight, afternoons of baby powder and laughter. Liam was crawling now, curious about everything, especially the sound of his mother's voice. But peace didn't erase memory. It sharpened it. Some nights, when the wind rustled the trees, Grace still heard dirt hitting wood. She knew healing didn't come from forgetting. It came from using what nearly destroyed you. That's why she decided to start the Grace Foundation, a nonprofit for women escaping domestic abuse and violence. If I survived being buried alive, she told Logan one night over dinner, then I can help others dig their way out too. Logan smiled, pride shining in his eyes. Then let's build it, together. By autumn, the foundation's office stood in downtown Austin, a bright open space filled with sunlight, children's drawings, and women rebuilding their lives. Sheriff Alvarez and ADA Karen Guillen joined as board advisors. Jenna Park, her loyal friend, became director of community outreach. On opening day, the press gathered once again. Grace stood at the podium in a cream suit, her son perched on her hip. Cameras flashed, but she didn't flinch. 2 years ago, she began, her voice clear and steady. I thought my story ended in the dark, but I was wrong. It was only beginning. No woman should ever feel trapped, unseen, or silenced. This foundation is proof that even from the deepest grave, hope can grow. Applause filled the room, warm and thunderous. Afterward, she walked through the hall lined with framed photos of survivors who'd already been helped. One woman, Maria, approached her in tears. Mrs. Pierce, you don't know me, but your story, it gave me the courage to leave my husband. You saved my life. Grace hugged her, overwhelmed. No, Maria, you saved your own life. I just lit the way. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the Austin skyline, Grace stood outside with Logan, watching the golden light reflect on the glass doors that read, "The Grace Foundation, a place to rise." "Look what you've built," Logan said softly. She smiled. "We built it. Every tear, every scar, it all meant something." Just then, her phone buzzed. It was Sheriff Alvarez. "Grace, thought you'd want to know. Derek Miller had his parole hearing today." Her heart skipped, but his next words came like a sigh of closure. "They denied it. Unanimous vote. He'll never see the outside again." Grace closed her eyes, a calm wave washing over her. "Thank you, Sheriff." When she hung up, Logan took her hand. "You okay?" She nodded. "I am now." They stood there for a long time, watching the first stars appear. Grace whispered, "He tried to bury me to end my story, but all he did was plant the seeds of this one." Logan pulled her close. "And now you're helping others bloom." Inside, the lights of the foundation glowed warm and steady against the night. For the first time, Grace didn't feel haunted by her past. She felt guided by it. The darkness had taken everything from her once, but now she owned the light. A full year had passed since the verdict, and the lake glimmered brighter than ever under the Texas sun. Grace Pierce stood on the porch of her farmhouse, a gentle breeze tugging at her hair as she watched little Liam toddle across the grass, his laughter ringing like music. The world that had once buried her in fear now bloomed around her with life. She poured 2 cups of coffee and set one on the table just as Logan stepped outside, his sleeves rolled up, the morning light warming his face. "You're up early," he said, smiling. Grace chuckled. "The Foundation's first anniversary event starts in 3 hours. I still can't believe how far we've come." "You earned every bit of it," Logan said, kissing her forehead. "You turned your pain into a purpose. That's not luck, that's grace." She laughed softly at the irony of her name, then looked toward the lake. "Sometimes I still dream about that night. The dirt, the dark, the silence, but when I wake up I see you and it all fades." Logan reached for her hand. "You don't have to erase the darkness to live in the light. You just have to choose where to stand." A car rolled up the gravel path then, Martha and Noah stepping out, both smiling wide. Martha carried a box wrapped in gold paper. "Happy anniversary, baby," she said, handing it to her daughter. Grace opened it and gasped. Inside was a framed photo, one of her father, Thomas Hayes, holding a little girl she now knew was Vanessa. Next to it was another picture of Grace herself as a baby. The 2 photos had been spliced together perfectly. Martha's eyes shimmered. "Your father always said love doesn't end, it just changes shape. I thought it was time you had them both together." Grace swallowed hard, tears forming. "Thank you, Mom. Maybe now, everyone can rest." Later that afternoon, the lakefront garden filled with laughter and chatter as the Grace Foundation celebrated its anniversary. Survivors, families, donors, and advocates gathered under strings of lights that swayed gently in the wind. Grace stepped to the microphone, her son perched on her hip. "A year ago, this foundation was just an idea, a whisper of hope," she began. "But today, it's proof that even the deepest wounds can become windows to light." Applause rippled through the crowd. She continued, voice steady, "This isn't just my story. It belongs to every woman who's ever been silenced, to every mother who's ever fought for her child, and to every soul that believed healing was impossible. You are the proof that it's not." She paused, looking up at the darkening sky where the first stars appeared. "A helicopter's light once saved my life, but the real light, the one that kept me alive, came from love, from faith, from people who refused to give up." The audience rose to their feet, clapping through tears. Logan joined her on stage, slipping an arm around her waist. Liam reached for the microphone, babbling happily, and the crowd laughed. Grace smiled through her tears. "If my story teaches you anything," she said, "let it be this. Sometimes being buried isn't the end. It's where you start to grow." As the night settled over the lake, lanterns were released into the sky. Hundreds of tiny flames floating upward, reflections dancing across the water. Grace looked at them, whispering a final prayer, for forgiveness, for peace, for Vanessa. And when the last lantern disappeared into the stars, she knew her past had finally found rest. The woman who once rose from the grave had now built a world where no one else had to. So, my dear friends, that's how our story comes to an end. You're still here, right? If you've stayed with Grace until this moment, maybe something in her journey has quietly touched your heart. Maybe it reminded you that pain doesn't have to define us, it can refine us. As the Stoics say, what stands in the way becomes the way. Every dark night, every betrayal, every heartbreak, it's all fuel for transformation. Grace was buried, yet she grew. And so can you. If life ever pushes you down, remember Marcus Aurelius's words, the Abing. You don't need to escape your pain, you need to rise from it, just like she did. If this story spoke to you, give it a like, share it with someone who needs a little light tonight, and don't forget to subscribe. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we help hearts heal.